In this tutorial, you're going to learn how to create a contact form for your React website and deploy it. Assuming that you already have a React application in which you want to add this functionality to, but if you don't, you can check out this sample code that I have on GitHub right here. I'm gonna link the this repository in the description of the video, and you can git clone it. So what's in this sample app is here I have app.js file in which I import this contact form, and this contact form is the one that takes in various different fields like first name, last name, etc. And now we're gonna start creating a server so we can take this information and send it over the email. So first step is I'm gonna install all the dependencies we're gonna need, starting off with node mailer. That is what's the package that actually sends the emails. Then we have express. We're gonna create an express server, course.env, also path, and that's it. While this is loading, I am inside the server folder. If you don't have it, you can create the folder in the root of the project, and I'll create a new file, name it index.js, and I'll start importing the packages that we'll be using. So first one is going to be constant path equals, I'm gonna maximize this. So now we can define which port we want this server to be running. So that would be constant port, and I'm gonna press process.env.port if it's defined in environment variables. If not, on local it's gonna be 3001. And creating express server, constant app equals express. So now we'll get a very like a sample API. This is how created. So you define a path first, let's say API, and then it takes in request result, and we can send back result.json, something like message hello from server. And we can also add a listener to show that we are running the app. So on port, we'll say console.log, server is online on port, and then here we will pass which port we're running for. So that's the variable that we created here. Okay, so to run this file, we can go back to the terminal, and in here node server index.js. You do need Node installed, but if you're running React, you probably do have that. So let's press enter, and to make sure all the dependencies are installed correct, you should get this in the console. Server is online on port 3000. And how can we navigate to this? In our browser, we can go to localhost, and as I mentioned, port is 3001, and we should, its API is the route. So yep, here it is, hello from server. Now we know that our server is running correctly. The next step would be to call this server from our React application. So if we directly call this localhost 3000/API, we might get course error. And to resolve this in here, we'll use app.use course, and we'll also add a proxy in the settings. So let's save index.js changes and go to package.json. In here, it's already in my GitHub repository, but if you're just following along, you probably wouldn't have this. So add proxy and HTTP localhost 3001 or whatever your port is. Now to test out that we are able to fetch the data on the React side, we can go to app.js, and in here I'm just going to add use effect and call the API just when the page loads. So that would be use effect fetch, and since we did the proxy, we can just do API, so we don't have to indicate the path before API anymore because it's going to be proxied. And add then response.json. Then data, and we can just console log the data. Passing in empty array here, we just need to run use effect whenever application loads. So make sure that you are still running the server by node server index.js. And I'm gonna make the code bigger so it's more visible. And we're gonna add another window here, and this would be for running the React app. So however usually you run React app, you can check that in package.json, but most of the times it's either npm start or npm run dev. So let's start the app. That's going to start on localhost 3000, and here is the code that I have in contact form that I imported in app.js. So if we do a console log here, we should be getting from app.js this data back from the server. That's the message hello from server. So we know that we have successfully connected our client side to the server now. Now let's add the secrets. This would be email address to which you want this contact form to be sent to, and also password. This password is not going to be the actual password that you use to log into your email, but I'll show you how to claim application specific password. So to do that, go to your repository project, and in the root create that env file. So this will not be included on my repository if you are looking at it as an example, because environment variable files should never be uploaded to GitHub. And if you're in your project, make sure inside git ignore add this .env file as well. So yeah, like add these two variables, and now let's go see how we can claim them. So for my provider, I'm going to use Gmail, but you can use any other email provider, the one that you're already using. You just have to find a way to get, usually it's inside your settings, application specific password, and I'm gonna in here type it in app passwords, and which app you want to, it's gonna be mail, and then the device doesn't matter. Click generate, and then copy this password, come back, paste it in here, and save the file. Updated environment variables, we have to restart the server. So I'm gonna stop running, actually the server is running in here. So Control C and go back to the server and restart it again. And here we can, if we want to use those require.env config, so we fetch them, and we'll also import the node mailer module. One more would be body parser, because we need to pass the information through the body, so we also need to configure that. And use it here. .json. All right, let's create an instance of node mailer. So contact email. This would be node mailer create transport. This should be tr. Here you pass in the name of email provider. If you're using different, then I would double check their name on the list on node mailer documentation. And then once we pass in authentication, so how it's supposed to access it. So this will be user process.env email address, the variable that we just added, and another one pass would be also we can also verify that this has been configured correctly, so that could be done by contact email.verify. So every time it's running, if it comes across issue with creating this transport, it's gonna console log it. So let's say if error console log error, and else let's just say that it's ready to send. Let's save this and rerun our server. So we get this message ready to send. Now let's create a new API endpoint that's gonna take this contact information and actually send an email. So the type of the API, previously we had get. This time it's gonna be post because we need to pass the data using body. So app.post API, and the path for this one I'm gonna make contact. Then we say we need body parser, extended set to false, request result. So this is where we take in all the fields that we want to send. If it's just a message, you can have one field. If it's other information, you can take it and just combine it inside the email itself. So I'm just gonna indicate all the fields that I have. So constant name, this is request.body. And I have request body last name. And when making an API call, you should make sure that the variables that you're, the body that you're passing matches the names of this one here. Otherwise, it won't be able to pick it up. So the next one, I also have message and phone. So then we construct the mail itself. So this is for node mailer already, we need from. Then we have to, that would be our email. Subject, you can name the name of your application wherever you're running this. Mission, I have it on portfolio. And HTML, this could be you can modify it to your liking. And once we have this mail object ready, we can say contact email send mail, call the send mail function, passing mail, and also we want to have a callback of what happens in case there's an error. If error, we'll send back as a result. Else we can send the code of like successful is 200 and also status of it being message sent. Let's save this, and before, I'm missing a queue here, before calling this from the React side on the app, or we test out our API endpoint, is that right now our server is not watching the changes. So every time you make a change and save it, you have to restart it. If you want to watch changes, since this is a small one, I don't have NodeMon installed, but if you install the NodeMon module and configure it, then it should automatically reload the server when there is a change. So I'm just gonna restart the server, and once it's ready, I'm going to go to Postman. I'm using our URL for the server and API contact endpoint. Make sure that the type of request is post, and passing in the object with all the fields that we want it to get. And once we click send, we get back response. Okay, now we know that the API is working. We can start integrating this into our contact form. So going into this file here, so let's quickly review what's going on in this form. I have created an initial state where all the fields that I want to have are initially empty strings, and then using useState hook, I pass in this initial state and create a state. It's called form details, and if you hover over, you can see all the variables fields it contains. Then for button, once somebody presses the button, I also want the text to update that it is sending, so I have a separate state for that, and also the state for status. So once the result comes back from API request, based on that, I'll display a text here whether or not it was successful. So here is the form itself. Inside I have few rows. This is input, type is text, and then inside for the value you have to pass the name of the state and then the name of the field itself, placeholder, and on change, the way this on form update function works, that it takes a category, so the field name, and then it takes the value would be whatever user entered. So it will take in the previous state and append the newly updated state of that specific field. Once we're over this different types of input, we have this button. The type of the button is submit, and then we have this text which updates whether or not it is sending or ready to send. Okay, now let's define the submit function itself. That's gonna send the email. So I'm gonna go right here, create constant handle submit. Since we're making, oops, I spelled that wrong. Since we are making a request to an API, this is going to be asynchronous function. And first thing we want to do is prevent default, or otherwise our page is going to get reloaded. And we want to set button text to sending. This is indication that we're about to start the request. And let's take in response equals await. Now we do fetch, we pass in endpoint of our newly created contact. This method, we have to indicate that it is a post method, and passing headers. So application JSON and last, we have to pass our body with all the fields. So JSON dot stringify. So stringify is a function, basically what converts an object into a string, because we can't just directly pass an object. So this would be form details in here. And once the result comes back, we're gonna capture it, await response.json. Here we can set button text to back to send. Also set form details. We want to reset the form. So this would go back to form initial details. That was the initial state. And after, let's check the status. If result code equals 200, update the status. We're gonna say success true, and message would be sent successfully. Else we can copy this and modify it. So this would be false and something went wrong. Please try again later. So here, if we have a message at all, then this will be displayed, and conditionally we're checking if it's success. We're gonna add different classes based on that and the text of the message. All right, let's save this. I think I am not running the React tab, so npm start. Gonna reload this. So actually this should be email, otherwise we'll get a inside form I need to indicate that on submit this equals to handle submit here. So going back, message sent successfully. Now I'm gonna go to email and check if I received that. So yeah, here it is. Fields are coming in undefined versus when I ran them using Postman, I was getting them in the email. So I noticed that here instead of application JSON content type I set application JSON, and that's actually important. Make sure not to forget this header for body to come in correctly, and you can also use maybe like Axios to make a request, but I'm not sure if you also have to, probably not have to set it separately, but I'll check. So let's try once again after that change. Here I'll see. Let's reload the page and send one more time. Message sent successfully. I received it, and here's my first name and last name. Okay, great. Ready for deployment. First we have to run build command. So for React that's npm run build, and once you do that, that should create a build folder that's usually not committed to Git, so it'll create in the root of the project, and we'll modify a server. So the way we're deploying this is we are serving our client-side app also with the server. So for that, we need to add this configuration app use. So this is going to take the build that was generated inside the build folder. So path.result, that is how we access it, and directory name, and the path to the build folder. And once this is all compiled, we can say app get everything request result, send file, and we pass the path to the build folder and say index.html. This should be path. What I usually do is I check my npm and node versions to include them in package.json, because for example, if any of these packages that you have installed already in the application are incompatible with the new versions that your deployment server might be using, then you might have it might fail the deployment. So you can check your versions by running npm-v and node v, and it will print out the versions. And what I did was, in the package.json, I added this engines field with the npm and node that got printed here. As for the deployment, I am using render.com. It is a free alternative to Heroku, and it's very easy to deploy. You can just hook your Git repository and configure settings. So it's pretty convenient. You can create an account using your GitHub. So I already have an account. I'm gonna go to dashboard. Once you're there, you're gonna create a new web. Make sure to select web service and connect my repo right here. So name this region wherever is closest to you or your users. Then for the branch, let's do this one, wherever your latest code changes are. Root directory, I'm not gonna put anything, it will automatically go to the root of the project, which is what we want. So runtime node, and for the build command, I'm gonna change it. I'm gonna put it as npm install and npm build. And the start command is also going to be start. So yeah, they have different tiers for different types of usage, but I have free one selected. And let's see, once we create the service, we do need to, okay, advanced. Here, make sure to add environment variables. So this is the variables that we created inside our .env file. So this would be email address, and you pass in your email address here. And then add environment variable. The next one is email pass, and the value of whatever it is for your password. Then create. And this is the deployed version of my form on this URL. So this would be it for this tutorial. Hope it was helpful. Looking forward to see on which projects of yours you're going to integrate this form. And I have a very long and intensive React tutorial coming up with all the new changes in React. I feel like it's time to go back to it and relearn or get introduced to some of the patterns. And if you guys can guess in the comments during this tutorial what projects I'll be building, I'm curious to see what your guesses are, and stay tuned. I'll see you in the next one.